In this series, and exclusive to this channel, you'll hear a word-for-word account of what the jury were told after hearing 9 months of evidence during Lucy Letby's original trial. Now, with so much harmful misinformation currently being spread online and in mainstream publications surrounding this case, this series seeks to provide for the first time exactly what transpired in court. That means no ill-informed commentary or any bias, simply the evidence as presented during the trial itself. This video has been made possible by the purchasing of court-approved transcripts, further details of which can be found in the video description box below. What you'll hear next is a detailed summary of the prosecution's case against Lucy Letby. This took place at Manchester Crown Court and was conducted by Nicholas Johnson, KC. You'll have worked out that we have 4 children left to deal with, so the order in which I'll deal with them will be child I first, then child J, then child N, and then child Q. I will then give you a composite series of lists. You'll notice as I've been going through, I've been pointing out various features which we say these children's cases have in common, and I'll give you the composite lists at the end. So starting with child I died on the 23rd of October 2015, having been born in the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Friday, August 7th. She was well travelled for a child who never left hospital. She was moved from Liverpool to Chester on the 18th of August, back to Liverpool on the 6th of September, and then back to Chester on the 13th of September. Then from Chester to Arrow Park on the 15th of October. Then from Arrow Park back to Chester on October 17th. As I say, to Chester where she died on the 23rd. After the evidence of child I's mum was read to you on January 25th this year, the next witness was Dr. Palanisamy, who is a consultant neonatologist at the Liverpool Women's Hospital. He told you about child I's progress following her birth, her transfer to Chester on day 11 of life, and her subsequent return with suspected NEC. One of the things that he told you was that medics don't worry about self-correcting desaturations. In the weeks before she died, child I's path crossed that of Lucy Letby on multiple occasions. During that time, both child G and child H were still in the neonatal unit in Chester, and having failed to kill either child G or child H, we say that Lucy Letby turned her attentions to child I. Of the 4 occasions that we allege child I was sabotaged by Lucy Letby was her designated nurse on 2. On both of those 2 occasions, we say that Lucy Letby falsified the records to make it look like child I was deteriorating before her collapses. The 3 incidents before child I's death are important, but because this is an allegation of murder, it's the 4th incident that really matters. We do not suggest that any of the first 3 incidents caused child I's death, but incidents 1 to 3 are important because they inform your interpretation of the events immediately connected to child I's death. I'm sure you'll be invited, on behalf of Lucy Letby, in due course to consider events in August and early September, which were highlighted by Dr. Evans in his reports. But those incidents did not cause or contribute to child I's death. I'm just going to deal with the 4 occasions on which we allege Lucy Letby attacked child I. But just before I do, I want to remind you of something that Dr. Marna Reid has told you. There was no evidence from the post-mortem examination of child I that she ever had NEC, or that she ever had any other bowel disorder. If child I had had NEC, then the evidence would have been found in histology at the post-mortem. So we say you can exclude NEC in this case. So starting with incident 1, this was the 30th of September at 16:30 hours when there was a large vomit and desaturation, followed by a further desaturation at handover, interestingly at 19:30. Child I's first collapse that day was marked with a quote, large vomit from mouth and nose ++ and desaturation into the 30s. You may think, and we encourage you to consider the similarities between that as a description of what happened and what happened to child G, both on the 7th and 21st of September. In other words, so far as the latter incident was concerned, only 9 days earlier. The day before, what I'm referring to as Incident 1 for child I, was September 29th, And the doctor, Lucy Letby, who finished part of her training in Chester in December 2015 or January 2016, examined Child I in preparation for the grand round the following day, the Wednesday. She remembered Child I, despite the fact that Dr. Letby didn't work in Chester for very long, because as Dr. Letby described it, quote, Child I had been seemingly well but became unwell, was shipped out to a tertiary unit and made a rapid recovery, which seemed to happen a number of times. This, she said, she had never known with any other child, although you know it's a feature of several of the cases that you are considering, several of the children who were in contact with Lucy Letby. Dr. Letby told you that she had been shocked and frustrated at Child I's death because Dr. Letby felt that something was going on that they were not getting to the bottom of. She was absolutely right about that, wasn't she? On September 29th, Dr. Letby found Child I to be in good condition with no markers of concern. Child I was anemic, but you heard that was a long-standing problem, and according to Dr. Letby, is very common in premature babies. And it wasn't a problem because there was evidence that Child I's bone marrow, her own physiology, was correcting the problem. Dr. Letby said that the fact that Child I looked a little pale on that examination was consistent with this issue of ongoing anemia, and that Child I's heart rate and her CRP were normal. And that so far as she, Dr. Letby, was concerned, the priority was to continue feeding and growing Child I. The aim was to get Child I on bottles full time. Wednesday the 30th was a day shift for Lucy Letby, and Child I was in nursery 3. And if we look at the population chart, which is in the first of the Child I sequences at tile 44, we can see there Child I in nursery 3. Lucy Letby had a monopoly of the children in that room at that time. And you know Lucy Letby didn't like being in nursery 3. Wednesday, of course, was the day of the grand round, which started at 9 o'clock, and it was Dr. Newby, the consultant, who reviewed Child I. You'll find her note of that review at tile 46. There were no remarkable findings. The plan was to give Child I her immunisations, to wean her off the hot cot, and to feed and to grow her. Give her immunisations, just like Child G. Another coincidence. There was nothing wrong with Child I. Child I's mum fed her with a bottle and did her cares at 10 a.m, and you can see that in the feeding chart. It's the last document in section 1 of that document, and what you can see is that during that feed at 10 o'clock, Child I produced a small stool. You can see in the BO column it says, quote, small BO, and the entry, of course, is signed by Lucy Letby. The fact that the immunisations were being planned shows we suggest, and for the reasons you now understand without me having to explain them, that the doctors were very happy with Child I. If we then go to tile 51, please, here we see Dr. Letby. She's now known, of course, as Dr. Hunt, and we see notes of the doctor's examination at 11:40. The point here, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason for the review. This is after the grand round, so after Dr. Newby had considered Child I. A couple of hours possibly after the grand round. The reason for the review was recorded by Dr. Letby as Child I's reduced temperature. You see at the top, quote, asked to review as temp. At this stage, Child I was taking full bottles, she was gaining weight, and on examination, according to these notes and according to the evidence she gave to you, Dr. Letby told you that Child I was handling well. During the examination, she produced a, quote, normal yellow seedy stool that indicated that her gut health was normal. It is inconsistent with any suggestion of NEC, according to Dr. Letby, and indeed a lot of other medical practitioners from whom you've heard. And in any event, NEC has been excluded, as I've told you, by Dr. Mana Reedis. Child I's chest was clear, she was not in distress, her abdomen appeared similar to the previous day. Dr. Letby's plan was to increase the temperature of the hot cot and to monitor Child I closely, even though she appeared to be clinically well. The important thing to remember, so far as this note is concerned, ladies and gentlemen, was Dr. Letby's evidence that in order to properly interpret her note, you need to insert a comma between monitor closely and if further concerns. So not monitor closely if there are further concerns, but monitor closely if further concerns. And this is critical to what happened afterwards. Dr. Letby remembered the mother of Child I, who at this time was there visiting Child I a lot, and was friendly with the staff. So what was going on at this examination, ladies and gentlemen? The mother of child I's evidence was read to you as agreed evidence. In that statement, the mother of child I told you that Lucy Letby raised the issue with her about child I's stomach. So on this date, Lucy Letby was saying to the mother of child I, there's an issue with child I's stomach. And yet that was not the reason that Lucy Letby called in Dr. Beebe. The reason was the reduced temperature. So what was going on here? In the agreed evidence that was read to you on the morning of January 26th, Dr. Ogden told you this. If ever concern was expressed about a swollen abdomen, we would examine the baby. No concern was expressed by Lucy Letby to the medical staff at this stage about child I's abdomen, despite the fact that Lucy Letby apparently, and the agreed evidence is, was expressing concern to the mother of child I. So why? Back to my favourite word, why was Lucy Letby expressing to the mother concern about child I's abdomen? And if she was concerned, and the fact that she was communicating concern is agreed, why did Lucy Letby not raise the issue with Dr. Beebe? The reason, inevitably we say, is that Lucy Letby was managing the expectations of the mother. Back to gaslighting. She was suggesting a problem that didn't exist. And lo and behold, the problem arrived. And the reason the problem arrived is that Lucy Letby caused the problem. If we go back to the feeding records, we see that on the 28th here on the screen, and then followed by the next day, the 29th, and then on the 30th, child I was an enthusiastic feeder from a bottle. But when we get to the 30th, everything was unremarkable until 1300 hours when child I was apparently asleep and apparently, according to the records at least, had to be fed via a nasogastric tube by Lucy Letby. You'll remember the mother of child I, in her agreed evidence, said at lunchtime she'd meet her family in the canteen. So this coincides with lunchtime, doesn't it? And the absence of the mother. According to the record, child I was fed 35ml with fortifier, and we've heard from several witnesses that would have taken a bit of time to do via the nasogastric tube. You'll remember the evidence relating to child G in that respect. Well, let's be generous and say it took 15 minutes. It might actually have taken longer if it was done properly, but let's say it took 15 minutes and therefore would have ended, if the time is correct, and that's always a big if with any record made by Lucy Letby, we suggest. But if it did take 15 minutes, it would have ended at 13:15. Well, what did Lucy Letby write in the notes, and when did she write the notes? The one accurate time that we get in this case, so far as Lucy Letby is concerned, is in the nursing notes, isn't it? And the medication notes, because they are times that are stamped by the computer system. If we go to tile 61, please, we can see that Lucy Letby's nursing note began at 13:36 and it concluded at 13:48. So this was, at the most, a note begun 20 minutes or so after the feed that I've just shown you on the feeding chart via the NGT by Lucy Letby. And what Lucy Letby recorded in the nursing note is that child I had had 2 bottles and 1 NGT, that the doctors had been asked to review and advised to continue with the current plan. That's not quite right, is it? This review can't have been the grand round, can it? Because Dr. Beebe had examined child I at 11:40. So this has to be a reference to Dr. Beebe's examination. At tile 62, a continuation of the nursing note is an addendum, and this is a note made towards the end of the shift at 19:31. This note is interesting, we suggest, because it speaks of a, quote, review by doctors, plural, at 1500 hours. And you'll remember that we allege this note is a complete fabrication. There was no medical examination of child I at 1500. It doesn't appear in the medical records. After Dr. Beebe's note at 11:40, the next medical record is made and timed by Dr. A, and it's at tile 73. You see at the top there, quote, asked to see patient due to vomit and desaturation. Now, if Dr. A had examined child I an hour and a half earlier, he'd have made a note of that fact here, wouldn't he? Even if he didn't make a note at the time. So who was this, or who were these, if we take Lucy Letby's nursing note literally, doctors who examined child I at 1500 hours? If we go back, please, to page 62, we can see that in this invented examination at 1500 hours, Lucy Letby speaks of child I appearing, quote, mottled in colour with distended abdomen and more prominent veins. Well, you won't find any reference to child I appearing mottled in the medical notes, either at 1500 hours because there isn't a note, or at 1630 in Dr. A's note that we just looked at. The nursing note, though, that we're looking at here, the one we say is invented, speaks of being advised to recommence full monitoring. You see the text is, quote, full monitoring recommenced. If we look at tile 57, which is the vital signs chart, we can see that full monitoring did recommence at 1500 hours. But who advised it? The answer is back to Dr. Beebe's evidence, isn't it? Dr. Beebe had advised that at 1140. So why did Lucy Letby wait until the mother of child I had gone to pick up her kids from school to recommence the full monitoring? Why did she invent a mythical medical examination at 1500? We know it is invented because if we go back to Dr. Beebe's notes, we see the yellow seedy stool. And in Lucy Letby's note, the one we were just looking at, the one that was made at the conclusion of the shift, she refers to the fact that at this invented 1500 hours examination, child I produced a yellow, seedy stool. So what Lucy Letby is doing here is she is transposing events from 1140, taking them and moving them onto a medical examination that she says happened at 1500 hours, which never actually happened. The possibility of there being a mistake here, ladies and gentlemen, can be excluded, because Lucy Letby's first note, the one I showed you first, had been made after Dr. Beebe's 1140 examination and before any events at either 1500 or later. So this is a very calculated way of using the records to give the appearance that a child with whom there was no problem at all had a problem. Lucy Letby planned her attack on child I. The mother of child I told you that she always stuck to a routine. She'd drop her kids off at school, she'd go and see child I, and she left in time to pick the kids up from school. She had her break at lunchtime. Child I's dad would come in at 17:30. Child I had been in the Countess for a long time, and this was a well-established routine. And therefore, from the moment that the mother left to pick the kids up from school, and you all know what time kids leave school, from that moment, Lucy Letby had the perfect opportunity to attack child I, didn't she? Because as I've shown you before, she had a monopoly on the children in nursery 3. She had a window of opportunity between the mother of child I leaving and the father arriving. Yet another case of a child suffering a life-threatening collapse just after a parent had left, having visited. What are the chances of these things happening at precisely that point, in the context of notes that you can be certain have been manipulated by Lucy Letby? If you're in any doubt about it, ladies and gentlemen, and the calculated way this attack was carried out, if we go to tile 93 and we look at the family contact note, which Lucy Letby made at 1932, what Lucy Letby wrote was, quote, mummy present when reviewed by doctors, had left when child I had large vomit and transferred to nursery. Staff nurse Taylor telephoned mum to update her and she is currently visiting. So had left the unit when this happened. At the end of the day shift, there was a further desaturation when child I was being handed over to Bernie Butterworth. And you'll remember the failure by Lucy Letby to note up the gas that was taken at 17:15. Bernie Butterworth said she couldn't remember doing the bolus, which is noted at 19:30 on tile 162. If we could just look at that, please. Bernie Butterworth said that when the neopuff was used, there was no chest movement and child I's abdomen inflated. So this is a classic case of what Lucy Letby has tried to persuade you happened to a lot of these children, that it was the neopuff that inflated their stomach. But that was not what caused the collapse, was it? It can't be what caused the collapse. And remarkably, despite everything that has happened, child I improved over the course of the night shift when Lucy Letby was not there. The temperature was reduced on the incubator, having been increased by Lucy Letby on the day shift. Her abdomen was less distended and there were minimal aspirates at night. Yet another miraculous improvement. Child I was rooting for her feeds overnight, showing signs she wanted to be fed. All good once Lucy Letby had left. It was the opinion of Dr. Evans that the lack of any gradual decline before the collapse and the relatively quick recovery meant that the reason for Child I's collapse was not infection. Dr. Evans thought the only explanation consistent with the facts, including the vomiting, was a dose of air being put down the nasogastric tube. Dr. Bowen agreed, and she said that the effect would have been to splint the diaphragm in a child with what she described as not entirely normal lungs. Dr. Bowen discounted the possibility of NEC. Professor Arthurs reviewed the radiograph taken at 1739. The original radiologist report speaks of, quote, splinting of the diaphragm due to bowel distension, and Professor Arthur's view was that the stomach and almost all of the gut, as he put it, was distended. We say Child I had been given a lot of air by Lucy Letby. By the time Ashley Hudson took over Child I's care on the following day shift, October 1st, Child I was clearly improving. Her stomach was less distended, and advice was taken from the doctors on recommencing feeds. The effect of Lucy Letby's sabotage was diminishing.